Well, it's the first time I've been back to see the boat since I came back on the 27th of July, and it's now the 19th of September. Been very busy kind of catching up with things at home. Anyway, I've come down to check she's all right. She looks all right from the distance. Tide's out at the moment. A terrible trip down, motorway was shut because of a big accident. And I'm down here going to stay overnight. I'm actually going to start getting ready for taking out the water. She comes out of the water on the 8th of September, sorry, 8th of October. And I'll probably get one more trip down here, but I doubt I'll get out sailing again, unfortunately. Very sad. So anyway, I'm back at Topsham Sailing Club, and I'm now going to get my dinghy off the rack. I have a rigid dinghy here to get out to the boat because obviously, oh, that's not it, it's that one. Because it's the rubber dinghy would be too much of a pain. They keep going down, and so anyway, they've got a rigid dinghy to get out. So yeah, get that off the rack, and I'm going to try and give you a catch up on my thoughts of the trip once I get onto the boat. On my way out, full circle. Looks all right from a distance. Tide's still well out. You see all the mud here. This is the old entrance to the Exeter Ship Canal. That's all blocked off now. There's another entrance lower down. But then Full Circle has a mooring just behind that. So very sheltered up here. You can see the M5 motorway up there. It's kind of the last reach of moorings on the River Exe, really. They stop at the motorway. There's no moorings above that. Shallowness of water rather than access. You can get underneath the bridge okay. I've had to wait. Full Circle's mooring dries at low water, and she's still on the ground. You know, you see the boat here behind La Pearl is still not fully afloat, but there's enough water for the dinghy to get to her. You see the boat up there on the mud, a bit of an angle. I'll find out how much bird muck there is now. After a month, nearly 6 weeks, I think, since I came back. Anyway, I need to grab hold of the boat now, so I'll do some more in a minute. She's pretty clean, very pleasing. Bit of bird muck, not much. Sometimes I've come on board after leaving it for a while, absolutely covered in bird muck. But no, pretty clean. So anyway, I'm going to do, I think, my kind of reflections on the trip while I'm here on the boat, and then publish it. And I'm also, whilst I'm here, going to start getting her ready for the haul out on the 8th of October, which is only just over 2 weeks away now. So I'll give her an oil change, might get the mainsail off.
Here's the map of the track around GB. Thank you to Stephen, who developed this. He's taking data from both my AIS transponder on board the boat, but that proved not to be terribly well. The transponder was reliable, but the gathering of the data from the web wasn't so reliable, and there were big chunks of the UK where we couldn't get it, and therefore we used something called Safe Tracks, which is a Royal Yachting Association app that I have on my phone, and it's used in conjunction with the Coast Guard, and it allows the Coast Guard to track me around the country and also have emergency contacts that are known, and if I don't turn up on time or arrive on time, then the Coast Guard can help in any rescue event. Anyway, that also tracks the boat so long as there's a mobile phone signal, so it doesn't work for a long way offshore. And so Stephen very cleverly managed to kind of fuse the two lots of data, AIS or the Safe Tracks data, to create the track. And I hope it was useful for you to be able to watch as I was going around and know where I was pretty much in real time. Some of them you might have noticed that the Safe Tracks data, I think, updates much less frequently. Sometimes I think kind of every 4 or 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes sometimes, and therefore occasionally you'd see the track going across a pier head or across a bit of land, but that was the reason for that. But on the whole, the data was never more than about 10 minutes out of date, so that's pretty good. So that shows where I went, and if you can zoom into it, you can see where I stopped as well, and that was great and good to keep for posterity. Well, first of all, I apologise that it's taken so long to get around to doing this kind of my thoughts about the trip around GB. Got home, just got snowed under with stuff, and so although I've been thinking about it for a while, I've only just got round to it. I've been down on the boat a day, came down yesterday, and I've changed oil in the engine, got the mainsail off, got the inflatable dinghy off and a few other things, and now it started raining, so I'm going to do this video and then I think I'm going to head for home. Well, I thought I'd start with the way I went round Great Britain, because I went anti-clockwise, as you know, and actually that tends to be against the kind of the majority thinking, because the majority of people go round clockwise. I don't think it would have made much difference either way. I went round anti-clockwise because of the timing that I wanted to get to Orkney, and I didn't want to have to rush through the west coast of Scotland, which was the bit I was most looking forward to. In terms of sailing, it wasn't all good, I must admit, as you'll have known from the videos. So the south coast was good. We sailed most of the way up to Dover. The east coast was not good. We had northerly, northeasterly winds pretty much all the way. The first little bit actually from Lowestoft was okay. We did some spinnaker sailing there, and we had little bits where we were able to sail, but an awful lot of that was motoring into the wind, or motor sailing into the wind. So most of the east coast was both cold and contrary winds. North coast, well, really it's mainly just the one sail from Orkney to Loch Eriboll, and that was a bit of a mixed picture. We were sailing, we weren't managing to sail directly where we wanted to go, and so we did have to do some motoring to get to Loch Eriboll, but it was a bit of a mix, and it wasn't a particular pleasant trip anyway, because the seas were quite rough after having had so much strong wind while we were in Orkney. But the west coast, although I was fearing a lot of southwesterly wind, actually was great, and we did a lot of sailing down the west coast. We had bits where we couldn't, usually due to light winds rather than contrary winds. So the timing, it was cold to Conway, and it was particularly cold on the east coast. When we were getting 12 degrees in Northumberland, the west coast of Scotland was getting 24, 25 degrees. But then it could easily have been the other way around. So I'm not sure it makes a lot of difference which way you go around. It's very much luck of the draw. So yeah, anyway, that's the way I went. It was fine. It worked apart from, I think whichever way you went, and whenever you went, you could have, from sat here in September, and I thought, I could be coming back early September. Early September's lovely. Early September has been a disaster. It's just not stopped raining, really. It's warm. So that was the first bit. The second thing, I suppose, is the planning. Well, the planning, I have to say, went extremely well. Pretty much things went according to plan. You could even argue it was a bit boring because it was so predictable. The crew in particular, I was really pleased with the crew planning. Everyone turned up exactly where they were meant to be at the right time. No one cried off. We didn't have any delays because of crew at all. Crew changes where we had intended. They all kind of clubbed together and shared cars and things like that so that they eased their transport. So that worked great. And the boat prep, apart from two little problems that I mentioned, a bit of an overheating problem, which is still, although it's fixed at the moment, I'm still a bit suspicious of why blades kept falling off my raw water impeller. And I'll have a look at that over the winter. At the moment it's okay. And the battery that just died, which just happens. And both things were fixed fairly quickly by myself with spares I had on board. The passage planning was good as well. Kept it flexible,
so that we could go to different places, and we didn't go to the places necessarily, all the places that I'd originally intended, partly because of advice on the way up, where we were told to go to thought other places were better, and partly because weather and tide intervene. So so basically, yeah. So we went whichever way we went round. Don't think it would have made much difference. The timing perhaps it would have been warmer had we gone a bit later. So 10th of April perhaps was a little bit too soon. However, because we were timing to pick up Marion and Stephen on the 5th of June, or leave Orkney on the 5th of June, and I wanted to have some time in Orkney, that really dictated us getting to Orkney around about the end of May, and so that's why we left so early. But perhaps if you were going another time, I would tend to leave a bit later when when the seas warmed up a bit, and because it was cold and we were using heaters in the boat. Oh, well, 2/3 of the way round, I'd say, which kind of ended up as tending to hunt out marinas where we had electric hookup rather than anchoring at some places, though, because the anchoring nights were definitely the nicest. The best bits, it's kind of difficult. The best bits, I suppose, were driven by the weather. After all, you're always happier when the sun's out and you're warm. So I would say the best bits were driven by good weather, really, rather than where you were. However, thinking about the places, I would say, although some of the places that you might not have thought, after the one that kind of I was so surprised about was Hartlepool. Doesn't get a particularly good press, and yeah, it's not the bit I saw was not a particularly pretty part of the town, but it had that wonderful museum there. It had a very nice marina. It was easy to get in and out of, so I quite enjoyed Hartlepool. But I guess the best places were places like Lindisfarne, where we were able to anchor. Again, the weather was good there. Amble was beautiful, and again, a lovely marina there, very friendly marina. Orkney, of course. Stonehaven, well, there's a turn up for the books, because we had a bit of a miserable time getting there. We had a bit of a miserable time when we left as well. Actually, the weather wasn't great when we left, particularly bad part of the northerly winds with cold winds. And the first night when we were in the outer harbour was miserable. In fact, we got very little sleep. And then we got bound, the harbour master says I wouldn't go out there for a few days. And so we went, and we got into the inner harbour, if you remember, drying out in the inner harbour. But Stonehaven itself was a lovely place, and lots of places to go. We went to a couple of castles. I was able to do videos in the local cafe. They had a real beer in the I think it was called the Marine Hotel, real ale there, and we had a great time at Stonehaven, and a great gym as well that I used. These are not in order, by the way, of me going round. They're just as they came into my head. So Stonehaven, yes, nice place to go if you ever get a chance to go to Stonehaven. Really nice town. Lochinver, place I really wanted to go and loved it. Plockton, again, lovely, and I'd been there before, so I knew it was lovely. And unfortunately, the weather wasn't great when we were there, and we had the one night where the only night we abandoned the boat in the whole trip and went to Inverness to miss the worst of the storm kind of gales that went through that night. Tarbert Marina, very nice. Port Patrick was down on the Galway Peninsula, was a really treat to go into. How they get away with the health and safety of going up those ladders onto the quay, I don't know, because they are so long. But there you go. It'd be a shame if they stopped it and turned it into a marina, really. Conwy was a revelation. I must go back there. Really nice place. Porth Dinllaen, on anchor in Porth Dinllaen. Absolutely idyllic on the north of the Llwyn Peninsula in North Wales. And then White Hills. Enjoyed our time in White Hills. We were stuck there as well for a couple of days. But a very sweet and very friendly little marina there. Whitby, again, another place we got. It was difficult getting in because of the high winds going in. and it blew for 2 or 3 days while I was there. However, that didn't matter because I was waiting for the crew change anyway, so we wouldn't have been going anywhere. And by the time the new crew arrived, it had calmed down. And I like Whitby. And then on the south coast, on coming back, Foy, and one of my favourite places ever to stop always is Dartmouth, which is just along the coast from here. So they were the best places. I don't think I should go through the worst places because it's not fair. The place I didn't mention was Loch Erible, actually. Loch Erible, beautiful. Quite a bit of swell comes in. We stopped at Rispond Bay, which is really right at the mouth of the loch, behind some islands. Slightly nerve-wracking because it is so remote, and you really don't see any other boats. There was a fishing boat in the bay on a mooring, but there's just nobody around. I believe the road actually is not that far away because the North Coast 500 goes around it, but we didn't hear any traffic. It was just wild, just along from Cape Wrath, and it probably spoiled a bit for me because I was anticipating Cape Wrath the next day, which was nothing like as bad as I expected it to be. Beer, if you like beer, and I like real ale. That was a bit of a desert in Scotland. Still, I used to live in Scotland and I thought it had improved, and I think it has in some places. Orkney had a good brewery, but the best pints I had were in Dover, strangely. Porthinline, Amble. I had an okay beer, an Orkney beer in Stromness, Conwy, Milo, and actually, best of all, Topsham. Crew, well, I can't say who the best crew were. That would be improper. They were all great. They all, as I say, arrived on time. No problems. Very little sea sicknesses. No one got ill, as in properly ill. And so that was great, and all good company. So crew were great. The sailing legs. The best sailing, I suspect, was the leg from Sovereign Harbour to Dover, which is about 60 miles. That was a sail all the way, not too strong winds, and we had the wonder of getting the double tide. Double tide, I might have explained it in the video if I didn't. The tide comes in both ways around the British Isles, so it goes up the Irish, when it's coming in, it goes up the Irish Sea and up the English Channel towards Dover. It goes up the Irish Sea all the way around to the top of Scotland and back down towards Dover through the North Sea. And then when it's going out, it goes the other way. So it goes obviously going up through the North Sea and round it back into the Atlantic and back down the English Channel. And the place that the two tides meet when they're coming in is Dungeness. And so if you get to Dungeness at the right time, you're coming up with the tide coming up the English Channel. And then if you get it so the tide changes at Dungeness, then the tide going out is still going up towards Dover and up into the North Sea. So you get a double tide. You get 12 hours of fair tide. And we managed to hit that on the nail, which was amazing. I could hardly believe it did happen, actually, but it definitely did. And so we had a really good spanking run up to Dover. Then from Lowestoft to Grimsby, we were spinnaker sailing for about 5 hours before it got dark. So that was pretty magical as well. Absolutely flat sea. You couldn't feel the boat rock at all, and yet we were doing 3-4 knots through the water. Or sorry, over the ground. We had quite a sporty but very a nice sail from Largs to Troon. That's where we got a bit flexible. We were going to Girvan, but because the wind wouldn't let us sail to Girvan but would let us sail to Troon, we went to Troon. Port Patrick to Peel was sailing all the way. That was good. We got a bit rough right at the end as we were going into Peel, if you remember when that fishing boat cut us up in the video. But apart from that, yeah, Port Patrick to Peel. Peel to Conwy was also great. We sailed all the way there. Had quite a good sail from Fishguard to Milford Haven. And then the South Coast again was good. In fact, the South Coast was probably the best bit. So Newlyn to Foy, then Foy to Salcombe and Dartmouth to Topsham, all with plenty of sailing. So they were the bits, but then the wind had been different. Who knows? We'd been different places. Obviously, we'd had a southwesterly going up through the North Sea. Then we would have probably all the best sailing would have been in the North Sea. So, just the weather plays such a massive role. The worst bits, I would say definitely the East Coast. The cold and contrary winds. It really was quite. We had pretty much all layers on, 5 layers of clothes, hats, everything, gloves. A particularly grim bit was from, I think. Well, it wasn't all the East Coast, but it was East Coast from Grimsby to Wick. And perhaps the grimmest bit was from Arbroath to Stonehaven. And that was partly because we were in Arbroath and it's a gated marina. By the time we could get out of the marina, we'd missed most of the fair tide. So we went all the way with the tide most of the way with the tide against us and the wind against us. And it was windy. So it was cold, rough, and very slow. So that was probably the worst bit. Other things that probably I didn't enjoy so much, I found that I was away from home too long. I did go back from Lowestoft, and then I didn't go home again until for a couple of days when we got to Milford Haven. So it was 3 months. Now, that was part of what I wanted to do. I wanted to be on the boat for a long time. I didn't want to have to keep rushing back to go to a meeting or do something else. And to be fair, Jean, my wife, was with me for the month from Orkney to Largs. But you miss everything else, all your friends, things that you do at home. So there was a little bit of kind of almost homesickness during that time. And I was beginning to I want to go home now for a bit, and just didn't need to go home for long, just a few days, just to see everything. And the other thing that I found on this trip was it wasn't really the passage plans. They were fine, but I was on a timescale. I wanted to be able to get back by the end of July, because I started having appointments back in the diary again by then. So I kind of said I was going to be away for that period, and so and I wanted to get back by then anyway. And so because of that, the daily legs are quite long. They were 30 to 60 miles, which is 6 to 12 hours, with a couple of longer ones, obviously, for the overnight ones when we had to have much longer ones. And so there was a need to kind of keep going. And also, because there's a need to do, if you're doing 12 hours and suddenly you've got the winds against you, then if you tack and beat against it, then it's going to be perhaps 24 hours, going to go twice the distance. And so that forces you into motor sailing, so you can sail closer to the wind. So you got the engine on longer than you would have liked to have done. So that's kind of, it's not a kind of trip where you think, oh, I'll sail where the wind takes me. It's very much we've got to get to this next place, or we've got to at least be going in that direction. So that's a bit of kind of spoils it a little bit. But then that's what it is, going around somewhere, going on a trip that long. That's what happens. The old guys must have been wanting to get to New York to deliver their coal or whatever, and they didn't have an engine either, so they had to put up with it, I guess. The wildlife was great, particularly birds on the East Coast and the Scottish part. Lots of birds I'd never seen before, puffins particularly, and having Stephen with me in the north, we were able to identify them all. Great northern divers, all kinds of things, ones that I can't even remember. And then the dolphins in Cardingham Bay, they were amazing. The blue bottlenose dolphins, and orcas in Moray, which I didn't even believe that. Well, I first of all thought they definitely were orcas, and then I thought, oh, perhaps they weren't, perhaps they were just big dolphins. And it wasn't until we got into White Hills and the guy came in and said, oh, the orcas are out there again. So so that was great. We also saw a minke whale, and that amazing jellyfish, barrel jellyfish that Avril videoed. Costs. Well, I spent a lot beforehand buying charts and preparing the boat and perhaps doing more servicing on things, putting equipment on the boat that I just felt I'd need. Particularly successful was the rain cover of the cockpit, which allowed us to keep the cockpit dry when we did have rain. No, we didn't have a lot of rain. It was a good summer, basically, but that was a great success. But after the prep, the main costs really were the berthing. Of the berthing now on the south coast is getting ridiculous. You know, you're talking 50, 60 pound a night. And it does get cheaper as you go north, particularly in Scotland. There's really good deals in Scotland, particularly in the Highland harbours, where if you pay one night, you get the next night free. So basically it's half price, about £15 a night. They're not big marinas, and the facilities aren't as good, perhaps, the bigger marinas around, but nevertheless, that's fine, because it does reduce it. Anchoring's obviously best. Never had to pay to anchor. I think it probably overall, and it's difficult to say because you spend money when you're at home as well, don't you? But I think about £4,000 probably it cost me to do the trip. Then 3.5 month holiday. If you did that, went to Australia or something, it probably cost you 10,000-12,000, wouldn't it? Would I do it again? No, I don't think I would do that trip again. It hasn't put me off sailing. But I don't think I'd do that trip again. I would certainly think about going back to the west coast of Scotland, going clockwise up and coming back, and spending more time up there. Perhaps going up, coming back home on a EasyJet flight for a few weeks, and going back and having another stint, and then bringing the boat back at the end of the season. I think probably my next trip is going to be, may not be next year because I've got other things on next year, but the year after, I'm thinking of planning a season on the Brittany coast. So taking the boat across, perhaps take a week to get across there, and then leave the boat somewhere, come back as a foot passenger on a ferry, and then go out and have a couple of weeks, then come back and then do that again or something like that, and explore the Brittany coast for a season. I think going back to the long legs, the 30, 60 miles, which means that you have to keep going to get there before dark or before the tide changes and things like that. I would like to be able to do shorter legs, so that you just and wait and be able to go when the wind takes you, perhaps go where the wind takes you a bit more, to avoid using the engine. I'd start a bit later. So I wouldn't be doing it in April, that's for sure. As I say, it could have been different. Had west coast of Scotland 26 degrees at the end of April, east coast 12 degrees. Could you believe it? The country's only about 100 miles, 150 miles wide. How could it be so different? But there you go. That's the country we live in. So I'm very glad I did it. It was a great experience. Some of these things can be a bit better in retrospect in some ways, because the memories are wonderful. But a lot of it was magical as well. Boat was great, and I'm definitely glad I did it, even though I won't do that particular trip again. So there you go. That's it. That's the end of this stream of videos for Full Circle around GB. Whether I'll do any more, if I do anything else, I don't know, but at the moment this will be the last video. So thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed them, and bye bye for now.